Is again, you guys all are going to lose out. Cheryl showed up. Kelly's here. We have new gift cards and you guys don't get a chance to win. But that's all right. You guys are going to win because the most handsome guy I know outside of myself, Mr. Bill Angove, is here to talk about 1031 exchange. So if you guys don't know about 1031 exchange, you're about to learn. I have known Bill for 10 plus years now and done, I don't know how many 1031s with him and his company. He's going to share with you guys stuff that you can learn and be able to share with your clients out there that are trying to get into the investment side. So it is all yours, my friend. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Angove, and I'm with Asset Preservation. We are a national qualified intermediary for 1031 exchanges. Just a little bit of my background, company background. API has been around for over 30 years. We're actually started here in the Roseville region back in 1990 by Placer Title. And after about 3 or 4 years, we were purchased by Stewart Title out of Houston, Texas. And we've since become one of the largest qualified intermediaries in the United States. I'm actively involved in various organizations. I actually, for your reference, because Gary was the education chair for PCAR for a few years, and I just gave up my leadership after 3 years of being the PCAR education chair, and what I do is teach, market, and educate CPAs, attorneys, commercial brokers, realtors like yourself, and investors here in Northern California about using 1031s to make more money with your clients and make more commissions. So that's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to go through some basics. Why do people do it? I'm going to talk about the numbers as far as capital gain. I'm going to talk about what is like kind, because it's very misunderstood in an exchange. I'll walk you through the process as far as the typical delayed exchange timeline you'll see most of the time. I think, opportunity-wise, you have a very large marketplace around you here within 3 or 4 miles of a lot of people that own absentee owners. And not a lot of people market to those people, especially if they own 2 or more, with 1031 as a tool to get listings and create deals. Because the benefit for you, number one, finding out about exchanges, is in every transaction, there's at least a sale and a purchase. So that's 2 potential commissions off of 1 client. I know an agent that is over in Folsom, as a matter of fact, and she focuses nothing but absentee owners. She's found clients where they're selling 12 properties. They're just tired of management. They're tired of the T's, as I like to say, tenants, toilets, termites, trash, and taxes. And so they're consolidating those properties, maybe selling 3 or 4 at a time and buying maybe a commercial triple net building that they don't have to manage. They don't have to do anything. So something to think about for you there. Okay, so we'll work our way through the materials here. So you have a client, they have an option. They own an investment property here in Diamond Oaks, hypothetically. They can hold on to the property. They can sell it this year and pay the taxes. We'll go through an example of what they pay in taxes. Or they can do an exchange. And in essence, kind of beginning stages, an exchange allows you to sell a piece of investment property, defer your taxes, both state and federal, and buy new investment property anywhere in the United States. This is not a new tool. This is not a tax loophole. Actually, exchanges have been around for almost 100 years as part of the tax law. As far as the way we do them today and the rules, those rules have been around since 1991. So not that long ago, but these are the rules that we follow today that were created back then. So there's different parts of the tax code. We're going to cover 1031 today. There actually is section code 1033. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. But when you had the Paradise fires, you've had the Napa earthquake, you've had the hurricanes in Florida, people were able to, or property was being taken by eminent domain through a county or federal government. They are actually given 2 years to buy a new investment property. They don't need a qualified intermediary when they do that with us. They just, if the property is taken through eminent domain by a city government or county or federal, when they deliver that property to the government or they buy it, you have 2 years to reinvest the funds. So that's section code 1033. Don't let me forget, there have been some extensions to 1031 due to the recent weather that we had in January. So I'll cover that more in detail as we go down the road. All right, so let's get to the example here. And this is classic in a lot of marketplaces here in the Sacramento region, where you have somebody that bought a property a number of years ago for $400,000. Okay, today it's worth $1 million. I think of downtown, midtown Sacramento, classic, the old fourplexes. Now they're, they've divvied them up and they're older properties, but they're worth $1 million. And so a lot of people say, well, okay, I bought it for 4, I'm selling for $1 million, so my gain is 600,000. Well, that's not true when you own an investment property. your gain actually becomes greater because of what's called depreciation. So when I buy a piece of property, say for $400,000, the county assessor says, okay, the land is worth $100,000 and the improvements on top of that are worth $300,000. Well, if you divide that $300,000 by 27 and a half years, that's $10,909. I get to lower my rentable income that comes in from my tenant. I get to lower it by that amount each year. When I sell that asset and I don't do an exchange, the accumulated depreciation gets taxed first. I'm going to cover that in just a minute. But when we write off all of that $300,000, it takes our basis from $400,000 down to $100,000. So my tax basis is $100,000, therefore my sale price is $1 million. So I'm actually making capital gain in the IRS's eyes is $900,000, a lot more, especially if clients that own the property for a number of years. And we start looking at looks like the internet rearranged some of the numbers there, but basically the depreciation, the cumulative depreciation, as you see there, $300,000 is taxed first at 25%. Then the balance of the $900,000 gain, or $600,000 in this case, so we total of 900, we tax for 300 of it. The balance is then going to be taxed at the federal long-term capital gains tax rate of 20%. And some of you may be saying, well, I thought it was 15%. It is, but when you have gains in excess of over $500,000, that 15% goes to 20%. So that's what we're seeing here. And then a lot of people aren't aware of the net investment tax, that 3.8% tax there. That came about through Obamacare. When they had to pay for Obamacare. And so they added another 3.8% on any income or gains over 200,000 single or 250 married filing jointly. So we added that in. So that's another $34,000. And then California has a sliding scale these days due to Prop 30. When Jerry Brown was in office, he got that passed. And we as taxpayers passed it again with Newsom. And so we have anywhere between 0 and 13.3% income tax here in California. Because of the amount of gain there, that's going to be taxed at 13.3. So let's review. I bought it for $400,000. I'm selling for $1 million. I'm going to pay $348,000 in tax. I usually like to tell people take about a third of your equity because it's divided between state and federal taxes. That's not rocket science. It's just a guesstimate. We always tell clients they should talk to their CPA or tax person. I use TurboTax. Well, it's time to find a CPA. Here in Roseville, I know a really good CPA. Her name is Donna Riolo.
She's our tax guy lady, and she's coming in on May 1st to talk to our people.
Great. Yeah, I send clients to Donna all the time.
She's awesome.
She's great. So moving on, if we want to, yes, go ahead.
You want to say her questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Submit questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back to that slide.
Okay.
If we were in another state,
Mm-hmm.
how would that differ?
Depends on
Depending on the state.
Right.
Nevada.
Nevada has zero tax.
So the state tax is gone.
Florida, Texas. So you pay federal taxes, but not state taxes. They make their money in property taxes.
Sure. So you'd still pay the depreciation recapture.
Yeah,
You'd
that's
still
federal.
pay the federal capital.
Mm-hmm.
What about that net investment?
That's federal tax too. That's Obamacare.
Okay. So only the state tax will change, that last one. Okay.
Yeah.
But still, that's
Gotcha.
13.3%.
So
100
here's,
grand, yeah. 120
here's the
grand.
thing that we've been seeing for the last 3 years is people are exchanging out of California. Go figure, right? The top state was Idaho for a number of years. Right now, the number one state in my book is Tennessee. So we're seeing Tennessee, some of the Carolinas, the usual Florida, Texas, Nevada. But what people don't understand is when they exchange out of California, the California tax doesn't go away. It follows you. So if you defer $200,000 in tax here in California, when you buy in a non-tax state like Nevada, Incline Village is classic, right? Or Henderson or Reno, California makes you continue to file a California informational tax return, saying that you own that property still in that other state. Because if you don't file that tax return, California wants its tax on that $200,000 a gain you deferred here.
What?
Yes. So you have to continue to file a California informational return, no matter where you buy in the United States, except for California, of course, saying you still own that asset. And if you sell that asset, California says, show me the money. So we call that the California clawback law.
Yeah.
Wow, that is terrible.
Yep.
That 13, so that
I'm leaving now.
13.3 would
So when you do an exchange, you're deferring all this tax. But
Right.
if you buy in Nevada and say you own it for a couple of years and you sell that property and you don't do another exchange, California wants that $119,000.
When you sell your Nevada.
Correct. Right. The question that comes up is what we see classic people doing is they sell California, buy in Nevada or Tennessee, and they eventually do what? They move into it. Well, that's not a taxable event. That's just changing the use of the property. So just like we see here, people selling, doing exchanges out of the Bay Area and buying here in Del Webb or wherever, 12 Bridges, and they rent the property out. And I'm going to talk about holding period in just a few minutes, so hold on to that thought. And then they move into the property, but that's not a taxable event. They will still pay the taxes when they sell it, even as the primary residence, but they'll still be entitled to the exclusion under Section Code 121.
How about if they pass away and it goes to the kids, the heirs?
And that's the only benefit of dying is you don't have to pay the taxes.
Okay, well,
Really?
I'm not trying to die just so I get a tax benefit, but
In this case,
at some point,
Wouldn't have to pay it either.
that's correct, under current tax law, yeah. Right now, if I pass away, I can give to my heirs $11 million tax-free.
that's a federal law, that's not
That's
state
federal.
specific, okay.
And that's 22 million with a married couple.
Oh,
But
wow.
my wife and I get in a car accident, we die, we're not in a position, but we could give our kids up to $22 million of our estate tax-free.
Gotcha.
So that's the only benefit of dying is the kids will inherit the property, what's called a step up in basis. Meaning I paid 400 in this example, the kids will inherit $1 million. So it's
The tax base has to change, okay.
It starts all over.
To rent it, and then eventually you pass away and you pass it to your children, you wouldn't, that's the way to get out of it.
Yeah.
That's
What-
just the 13.3%.
Correct. Right.
Hmm.
So what people should be talking to Donna next time she's in is what is the benefit or negative? Because people think, well, I'm gonna gift deed my rental property to my kids while I'm alive. There's real no tax benefit to that.
Hmm.
Because if mom and dad bought the property for 100 grand and now it's worth 5, guess what the tax rate is for the kids when they get
5.
it's $1 million,
Oh.
$100,000.
Oh, okay.
So they bought it for 100, it's worth 5. They gift the property to the kids. The kids maintain that same $100,000 tax basis. It doesn't go away.
Okay.
The only way those taxes go away is when mom and dad die, then the kids would inherit it at that $500,000. So I don't see, and that's a question for Donna,
Okay.
is there really a benefit of gifting properties to the kids while you're still alive? I don't think there is.
Okay.
So moving on, this is what the tax code says. It says basically no game in the law should be recognized on the exchange of property held for productive use in trade or business or held for investment. Translation: anytime that you are listing or selling a property that is not someone's primary residence, life should go on, call Bill. And number 2, and Gary's done that, call Bill and then explore the idea of doing an exchange. And basically what you could tell them is, I'm not an expert on this, but if you want to sell that property and defer your taxes and buy maybe 2 properties, maybe one in Arizona, one in Hawaii, but you eventually want to have a vacation home, that's fine. The tool allows you to do that and defer the taxes and buy a new investment property anywhere in the United States.
I'm gonna have a new one for you in Fair Oaks. We're evicting someone right now, but as soon as they've had it for 25 years, but they're gonna take that and go to Idaho with it. So
Gotcha.
we'll be talking shortly.
Great. Thank you.
Good.
So the things that we cannot do an exchange on, let's see if it goes for it. We cannot do, it says stock and trade or other property held primarily for sale. What they're talking about there are people that are dealers of real estate. Who's a dealer? Lennar Homes, right? They buy, build, and sell. They don't do exchanges because they're a dealer of real estate.
Yeah.
Some developers, they buy and build, do a build to suit and sell off maybe buildings like this. Okay, they're a dealer. But let's say a developer builds this building, they put you guys in as a tenant, they own it for 5 years. Now, are they selling it for resale or are they selling it as an investor? They're typically selling now as an investor because they held it for a long period of time. Their intent changed. Stocks, bonds, or notes. I cannot do an exchange on stocks, bonds, or notes. Okay. And the other question I get is, can I sell my rental house and pay off the mortgage on my primary residence? No. Cannot pay off the mortgage on grandma's house. Basically, you need to sell real property and buy real property when you do an exchange. So stocks, bonds, notes doesn't work. Peloton stock is not a good one to buy right now. Investor motives, other than tax deferral, you see all these bullet points up on the screen: leverage, depreciation, increased cash flow management. Really, we're seeing because the boomers retiring, They're doing it for estate planning. They don't want to be a landlord anymore. They don't want to deal with all the tenants, toilets, termites, trash, and taxes. So they're consolidating, and then I'll touch on this one. Have you guys heard of Delaware Statutory Trust, or DST?
I was gonna ask you about DST today.
Yes, so,
Or
There-
WS,
huh?
or WS.
No, it's a Delaware Statutory Trust.
Oh.
There is what's called a real estate investment trust. That's where you buy stocks in a company that buys real estate. In this case, with the Delaware Statutory Trust, you're buying a portion of a building that you become an owner along with maybe 30 other people. So the classic are that these are large, very institutional grade companies. Inland is one of those companies. Pasco is another one. Blue Rock is another one. And so they'll go out and buy a 300-unit apartment complex in Nashville. And then they'll turn around and sell bits and pieces to people in exchanges or investors. They have to be what's called an accredited investor. They have to have a net worth of at least $1 million. And you can exchange into 0.025 of that building. And the problem is this is not a liquid investment. But what they promise you, well, they don't guarantee, they promise that currently you're gonna make 3.5% to 4% on your money, cash on cash.
Yeah.
They hold it for 5 to 7 years, and when they sell, you're gonna benefit for that appreciation value, so long as it appreciates. Who knows whether we're going into a recession or not? I'm not making guarantees.
Yeah.
But we are seeing a lot of the boomers. There's a financial advisor here in Roseville. His name is Jeff Bangeter. I don't know if you've heard of Jeff, but I've done a lot of seminars with him over the years. Talking about this as an alternative investment. The downside to you is you're going to earn a commission on the sale, but you probably won't earn a commission on their purchase because it's considered security.
At DST, there is a couple companies that do allow
Yeah,
commissions. I've
yeah.
talked to Barry Mathis about it at length.
Yeah, he's pushing that. I would just proceed with caution because the securities people say it's still a security and they cannot pay commissions to real estate agents.
Okay.
That's one position I've done presentations with Barry too. It's not my
Gotcha. No
highway,
worries.
so to speak, whatever.
No worries.
All right.
So is there only one, DST? Is it Wyoming?
So the
have one?
structure is called a DST.
Yeah, does Wyoming have one?
Who?
Wyoming.
Wyoming. It has nothing to do with the state. It has to do with the company. So for example, Inland Company, they're a DST, they're based out of Chicago, but they buy properties all over the country. Not in California, because most of them feel California is too expensive. But a classic that you also see is other than apartments is they'll buy not retail, but they'll buy right now, what's really hot is the Amazon distribution centers. Because they'll sign a 25-year lease. So the builder that builds that sells that off to Inland, and then Inland will turn around and sell bits and pieces of that investment to investors like us off the street, so to speak. But you have to be an accredited investor. Okay. So just to make sure everybody understands the misunderstanding of what is like kind. Like for like is very broad. Many people think if you sell a rental house, you have to buy another rental house when you do an exchange. Not true. Everything that you see on this screen, looks like we lost a couple. Everything that you see on this screen is considered like kind. So, whether it be in the foothills, you've got these farm and ranches, you've got the vineyards in Napa, where maybe their primary residence sits on a corner of that property. They can do the primary residence exclusion for the 1 acre their house sits on and do an exchange on the other 99 acres of Chardonnay grapes or whatever it may be. So keep that in mind. That
Would a syndication qualify?
no, syndication is because it's not considered real property when you invest into syndication. So it's like buying into a partnership. A partnership interest is not exchangeable. So if the three of us bought this building and we formed an LLC, and whoever Tammy he mentioned online, Tammy sells a rental house and she wants to buy into this building with us, we cannot sell her an interest in the partnership that owns the building because that's not like kind or considered real property when you do an exchange. We would sell her, say, a 10% tenant in common,
Yeah.
co-owner of the building. That would work.
Okay.
Syndications don't work.
And you can do that. I mean, someone could ultimately buy 10% of a building if that was available. I mean,
So if you sold a rent house, you sold a rent house, and I sold a rent house, and we wanted to buy this building together, we could do that. We couldn't form an LLC right away because the same taxpayer selling needs to be the same taxpayer buying when we do an exchange.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll cover that in just a minute. So the question that's up on the screen is, how long do I need to hold a property for before I do my next exchange or move into it? And that's a no answered question. Some of the bullet points that we get as an answer, in the number one at the top, you see the word intent. So this applies to not only the federal government, but it also applies to California, because California is pretty aggressive auditing people that do flips. So you buy it, own the property 6 days, flip out of it, and do another exchange. You're probably going to be audited by the franchise tax board here in California, because they don't feel that is a long enough holding period. So there's a couple perspectives up on the screen. You see one perspective, hold it for a minimum of 12 months, or more conservatively, there's a private letter ruling where the IRS ruled in favor of that person, saying, yeah, 2 years would be an acceptable holding period. So is it a year? Is it 2 years? Longer the better, showing the intent that it was going to be held for investment. I just did a deal last week. The guy was held property 90 days, but he had the intent to hold it for a long period of time, but he got an unsolicited offer. And he's going to do an exchange into another investment property. So that helps support his intent that he's not cashing out. His intent was to hold the property, but he's also going to hold the new property for investment also.
Well, you say intent. So say my intent is to hold this as a rental property long-term. And then I realize that the interest rates go up and the market shifts and I'm worried that I'm going to lose, $100,000 in equity position. Is that enough reason for me to sell?
What does your tax person say?
I don't know.
That's done.
Well, believe me, it's in front of her. I'm supposed to talk to her this week.
Yeah.
Or no, next week for my taxes. So
We can't give an opinion. What someone asks us a question like that,
yeah,
we'll send us we'll send them our template on this topic, but it basically tells them what I just said here verbally, is there is no set holding period. Time is one factor, intent is the key factor with the IRS.
Gotcha.
And then that when we pass the buck to the CPAs.
Gotcha. Yeah, mine was just shy of 12 months. I had it like 9.5 or 10 and a half months. Sorry. But the market was shifting. And so I sold it instead of keeping it because I couldn't refi.
And, because there is no set holding period in the regulations from the IRS, that probably will apply, but you never know.
We'll see.
On Form 8824, which is the form you file for the IRS on the exchanges, the third question asks, well, first question says, what'd you sell? The second question says, what'd you buy? The third question on their form asks, how long have you held the property you just exchanged out of? So that could be the red flag question for them right there.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm just going to touch on this revenue procedure. It talks about vacation/second homes. We're so close to Tahoe to the Berry right now, but we've got Hawaii, we've got Bodega Bay, we've got all these vacation markets that are probably pretty close to us. So does a vacation/second home qualify? And the answer is it depends. There was a court case where the IRS disallowed someone who owned the property as strictly a second home. Meaning it was strictly for personal use. They didn't exchange and bought another property strictly for personal use. IRS disallowed it because it wasn't held for investment. They took it to the tax court and the taxpayer lost. And so the IRS issued what's called a revenue procedure. This is their guidance. And they said, if you want your exchange of your vacation/investment home to qualify in 1031 for the 2 years before you sell it, each of those 2 years, you need to rent it out for a minimum of 2 weeks per year. And your personal use cannot be any more than 2 weeks each of those 2 years. So that's the revenue procedure that they came out with the IRS. It also says you can use it 10% of the time that it's rented. So if I bought a property in Tahoe, for the first couple of years, I do a ski lease, right? And try to rent it out as much as possible. But if I rent it out for 30 days or more, then I get to use it. No, if I rent it out for 300 days, then I get to use it 10% of 300 days. 30 days.
Yep.
Right. So what they're trying to do is trying to avoid people doing exchanges into just properties that are going to be just strictly second homes initially. So let's dive into the numbers a little bit. Now, I want to start this conversation with saying it is not a requirement that you do these things by the IRS. This is, if you don't want to pay any taxes, you do two things. Number one, it says reinvest all of your proceeds. Okay. Number two, it says acquire a new property with the same or greater debt. So you see a sales price of $900,000. We have an outstanding loan of $300,000. My closing costs and commissions are $60,000. So my proceeds that come out of the sale are $540,000. So the kind of guidance number one is reinvest all the proceeds. So you see, we take the $540,000. We use all of that money that comes out towards our down payment on the new property. Guide number two is we want to take on a new loan same or greater as the old loan. So in this case, there's nothing left over on that far right-hand column, so they don't pay any taxes. Can I buy a lesser property? Yes, I can. It's be a little slightly delayed.
So if I own, I got one I'm looking at right now, it's 18 units. It's boarded and vacant. But it's probably rehab worth 2.5 million. I can go and buy a fourplex in Florida for 2.5 million, even though the 18 units is here and the 4 units is there, or Tennessee or wherever.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Like means investment for investment.
Okay, that's what like for like means. I forget that exact
absolutely.
terminology. Okay, cool.
Now, what if I want to buy a lesser property? You see that a lot coming from the Bay Area, and that's fine. But in this case, you see out of the 540, they only reinvest the 440. So there's $100,000 of cash left over that we refer to that as cash food. And so they're going to pay taxes on that $100,000. The same thing with the loan. You see their old loan is $300,000, but the new loan is only $260,000. So that $40,000 difference is treated like they receive cash.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be the total boot in this transaction is going to be $140,000. So they're taxed on that. That's why I always say, if you're going to buy a lesser property, make sure that you run your numbers with your CPA to make sure it still pencils in that case.
Yeah.
Are there any questions that have come up with the audience?
I haven't seen anything in the chat. Anybody? Molly's probably grocery shopping while she's there. Tony's
Very funny. I have a question. Does the 1031 exchange have to be started before the house is sold? Can it be done after the fact in any situations?
Well, let's define house is sold. So the kind of the order of events is you find a seller that wants to sell their investment property, you put it on the market, you find a buyer. When I have people call me, when they open escrow, they say, you just sold the house. Well, we all know that that's not sold. Close of escrow is sold, right? So typically they want to set up the exchange with us about a week to 2 weeks before close of escrow. We have a template on our website called Stages of an Exchange, which is a good one to follow. But it says right up on the screen, it says, have your client consult their tax person first, have them talk to me. I can walk them through the process and timelines and the numbers and everything that you're learning today. And it's really important when you get a prelim on the property. So the property goes under contract and you get a prelim. It's really important to understand who's on the title because people get divorced, people die. You guys all know the routine of we need to figure out who the taxpayer is. If the three of us are on title as 33.3% each, okay, are all three of you doing an exchange? Because if all three of you are doing exchange, then we need to do separate exchanges for each taxpayer.
Oh, well.
Yeah, because the IRS sees us all as separate taxpayers. You have a different social security number than me, right? But if you have a husband and wife married funnily and jointly here in California, they're one taxpayer that would do an exchange.
That could be.
Yes, it could, and it does. People own properties into trust. Okay. Or you've got my brother's name is Doug. So Bill and Doug Angove own the property for Sally Altman's mom, who's living in assisted care leave. So we're taking care of all our affairs. So the deed shows my brother and I as trustees of the trust.
That's true.
All right. So here's the important thing. When you have an offer come in on the property, make sure the prelim and the contract match, because I get that often. Husband and wife are selling, but only the husband has signed the purchase and sale contract or the listing agreement. You can get both out all the time.
Yep.
So we need to confirm who the taxpayer is to make sure that the contract and the prelim match on that. But like to answer your question, typically that's done about a week before the closing. All right, what you have up on the screen now is the basic delayed exchange format. And if you drew an imaginary line right down the middle, the left-hand side is the sale. The right-hand side is the purchase. So just like when you're selling someone's primary residence, when you close escrow, the deed goes directly to the buyer of your property. It doesn't really impact, the exchange doesn't impact the buyer of your property in any way whatsoever, okay? You have the contract language, it's seller's intent to exchange through the CAR forms. And so the closing, what's different in the 1031 world is the proceeds go to a qualified intermediary. That's what we do. So in the example I was talking about before, that 540 of proceeds, that's held by our company. So two things that we mainly do. We help your client document their exchange, and we hold their proceeds between their sale and purchase. Go further on the question, if your client has closed escrow and they call me after the fact, they have a taxable event, We do not backdate our documents for anyone whatsoever. We do not commit tax fraud. Not gonna do it. We don't put, 200,000 exchanges at risk for one deal. So they've got to set up the exchange prior to close of escrow, okay? So this is closing day 0 on the left. And then, of course, they have 45 days to identify, and I'll get into this a little more deeper as we go. They have a total of 108 days then to close on their replacement property. Word to the wise about my industry is we are unregulated, believe it or not. At any given time, we're holding about $6 to $8 billion of people's money nationwide, unregulated.
Wow.
Here in California, there was a guy that bought some different exchange companies and took off with the money. So California said, no, if you're a qualified intermediary here in California, you have to use good funds law, which means you cannot place the client's funds in any kind of speculative investments. It's got to be like money market accounts, which is exactly what we do. We go to Citibank or Capital One, whoever those big banks, they come to us and say, how about placing $1 billion with us and we'll give you X amount of interest on that money. So that's the way that we make our money in the exchanges. We earn some of the interest on the funds that we're holding. We don't earn all the interest, but we do earn a portion of it. So just be careful. You may find somebody that's sending you emails saying, we'll do your exchange for $500. Well, how long have we been in business? What kind of security do they provide? Is there bonding? Is there E&O insurance? Is there someone that will communicate with me throughout the process? Do I get confirmation that the funds came in and where they're being held? All those are typical questions that you want to find out, not whether it's 500 or 1,250 that we charge. Most of like First American, Fidelity, Chicago, Old Republic, all the QIs in that range are safe typically to use because they're owned by a big parent company who backs their performance. We're all in that $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 range. Some are as high as $1,800. Some do this, they charge $900 on the sale and maybe $400 on the purchase. So they split it. Ours is just a flat $1,250, which pays for one sale and up to 3 purchases in the exchange, okay? So something to keep in mind is, the questions that come up is, can I have my replacement property under contract before I sell my old one? The answer is yes. So if you guys know you're gonna close on March 15 on the old property, can you be out there today making offers on the replacement property? Yes, you can, but you'd probably make your offer contingent, I hate that word, but make your offer on the new one contingent upon the old one closing first. Questions come up. Can I close my new property immediately after I close my old property? Yes, we call that a simultaneous exchange. In that case, we wire the funds directly from XYZ title to ABC title. We never touch the money because it's within a 48-hour period. So it's simultaneous exchange. Do I have to wait the 45 days to close on the new property? No. Again, you can close anytime within that 180-day window. Another question I get is, okay, so I need to identify properties. Do I have to have them in escrow to identify them? And the answer is no. Once you close, you can put down the addresses, and let's delve a little deeper into that process. Just has a slight delay. Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, what would happen if they all fell through? And
Right.
you got to the end of your 45 days and like, oh my gosh, what
Look,
happened?
Let me cover that. So one of the options is you can list 3 properties, okay? So let's say I list property A, B, and C. I get to day 20 of my exchange and I want to change my list. The good news is you can revoke the list of A, B, and C and submit a new list D, E, and F. What I usually tell people is wait till you're like at day 43 and then send us your final list. So they don't have to keep identifying or revoking. So the list is changeable inside of that 45-day identification period. The bad news is the list is not changeable after day 45. So if they get out here to say day 60 and they can't or don't want to buy any one of those 3 properties they identified, the regulations stipulate they'll have to wait until day 180 expires to get their proceeds back from us.
Ouch.
Really important. That's what we do is educate. That's why we have a policy. We have to talk to every one of our clients and explain these rules to them. So there's not, when they get out here and they call you and say, Bill's holding my money hostage, I'm going to sue them, I'm going to sue you, I'll never use you again, that kind of, the excuse people. So we want to make sure they understand these are called the G6 restrictions of the regulations.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, I mean, I never reference stupid question.
How it works.
I was gonna ask what happens at the end of at the 180 days, then can they just start over and,
No, they get hit with the taxes.
Right.
oh, they get hit with the taxes?
Two things. Number one,
You're releasing the money to pay the taxes.
so at day 45, if they have not identified any properties, at that point, their exchange is done. We're gonna wire them the money back to wherever they tell us to. We have to withhold for California. California has a 3 1/3 withhold. So if they have identified 3 properties that get to day 60 and they're not gonna buy any one of those properties, they're gonna have to wait till day 181. We're gonna wire them their money back. We do not refund their fee to us because we earn all our money on the front side. But then they're gonna be subject to the 3 1/3 at that point. Now, what some people will do is they'll start an exchange in, say, December of 2023. And when is their 45th day? It's in
February.
January of 2024, right? Well, if they sold in 2023 and they didn't do an exchange, when do they pay the taxes on that money? April 15th, unless there's another extension of 2024, right? So they pay the taxes right away. But if they start an exchange and they end up not identifying any properties at the end of the 45 days in 2024, so they receive the money in 2024, when do they pay taxes on it?
2025.
April 15, 2025.
All right, so they buy themselves a year ultimately.
And that could be, with a lot of money, that could be a lot of interest. So the regulations stipulate you have to identify in writing, not just call me. So I'll put up an example of an identification letter here in just a minute, but it's got to be sent to us before midnight of the 45th day of the exchange.
Can we write a DST as one of our properties?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the options. And this is just an example. Can't really read it on a smaller screen. Where's my 3 property? Oops. And then go back. Just got a slight delay here.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my laptop there.
One more.
Bill, I missed something. What's a DST?
We were talking about it earlier. It's called a Delaware Statutory Trust. It's a type of investment that does qualify as like, kind, and exchange. And basically what you're doing is buying a small percentage of a very large property that's
Okay,
maybe
got
by
it.
a very large institution. And what they a couple of years ago, they'd say you made 5 to 6% on your money. You don't have to do anything. You know, they call it mailbox money. Well,
Yeah.
now everything's EBT, so it doesn't count as mailbox money anymore. But that's an option. There's a gentleman, a financial advisor here in town that promotes those investments to boomers. He's doing all kinds of seminars. He's gotten a hold of these lists of people that have net worths of X or properties, and he invites them to these dinners, you know, wherever, Ruth Chris, whatever, and sells them on this. He doesn't push it. He just says, this is an option for you. So going back to, you identify property A, property B, they're local, but you're not sure. You could always identify a percentage of DST. They usually have a menu of what's available now type of deal.
Gotcha.
So what I was trying to find out here is how many properties can we identify? So as mentioned, the first option is I can identify 3 properties. It doesn't matter the price or order of those properties. If you want to identify more than 3, that's fine. The 200% rule says if you identify 4 or more, then the value of all of them combined cannot be more than twice the value of the property you're selling. So if I'm selling a Scampton Ranch for 500 grand and I identify 4 properties potentially, the value of all 4 of those together can't be more than $1 million.
Oh, gotcha.
So it gets restricted if you start identifying more than 3. Now, if you're selling for $10 million, you could identify 20 properties and not go over 20 million hypothetically.
Got it.
Last option, the 95% rule says if you do identify more than 3 and their values do exceed twice the value of what you're selling for, then you basically have to buy your whole list. So back to my example, if I sell for $500,000 and Gary finds me 5 properties and they're all together, they're worth $2 million, I have to buy all of them for that rule to work.
It's a terrible problem to have.
If I can finance that.
I always thought that. So I thought you identified 3 properties about the same price that you wanted to exchange into, in case one of them didn't work out.
Absolutely, that's what the ideal thing to do.
I guess I'm just learning now that you would be subject to buying them all.
Only if you identify more than 3.
Only if you did.
So it's kind of like algebra, if then.
Gotcha.
First option 3,
Okay.
doesn't matter price
All
order.
right. Yeah.
If then more than three, the 200% rule. And then the third rule says if more than three and more than double, then you have to buy the entire list,
I don't
basically.
know why they came up with that.
Well, there didn't used to be a minimum or maximum. So you could put, you know, in 1984, when this was still coming around, here's the LA phone book. I'm gonna buy one of these. We don't have phone books. So, yeah, it's A, B, or C are your options. Most people choose to go option A, which is the 3 property rule. So that gives you the ability to buy just A and B, and C. So what if I'm selling 3? I'm going to consolidate that money into one larger property.
Oh.
Important to note is when property number 1 closes, that
45
starts the
days
clock
starts.
ticking. So you want to find one buyer for all 3, but that means you're dealing with an investor who will want you to discount the price. Or what you'd want to do if you have one investor that's going to sell 3 and you get an offer on property number 1, you probably want to build in extensions
Yeah.
or some kind of contingencies that this deal's not going to close until these 2 close within a certain window. And you definitely want to have all 3 of them close within the identification period. So you know what numbers you're going to be working with over on the other side as far as value of properties you're going to identify.
Yeah.
What if I'm going to try to switch the slide? When that slide does come up, it talks about selling 1 and buying 3.
Oh, okay.
And that's fine, but you've got to be able to close those new properties within that, there we go, that 180-day window. So there's no extension. Now, I promised to bring up the California disaster relief, so I'm going to do that now. So we had those storms in January, right? We created a lot of havoc and destruction here in many counties in California, not all. So the IRS issued a disaster relief. And they said in past disasters, like the Napa earthquake, if somebody was impacted by that earthquake within a certain date window, they could get up to an extra 120 days on their identification period or their closing period. In this case, what they did is, as you all know, or may not know, is they extended our tax filing date from April 15th to May 15th. Yay. But that also, if you have people that are in exchanges where they close maybe right before December 27th or after December 27th, their 45th day could potentially be extended to May 15th. Or the 180th day could be extended. So if they're in this certain window between January 8th is the start date they gave us and May 15th, if they're 45 or 180 days falls within that window, in other words, if they close today, their 45th day would be May 15th. So that's where we have a publication on that we send out to people, but we cannot tell them, yes, you absolutely qualify. That's getting tax advice. We're not allowed to do that. So we provide everything for them to share with their tax person and they can decide if they're eligible for that extension. But it's pretty huge. So it's not just California. They had the hurricane, is it Earl in Florida? They had other natural disasters out there that qualify. So we do have a piece on that on our website. I think that's it as far as the computer's concerned. I think I'm done. Oh yeah, we're not going to get into reverse exchanges today. So,
All right.
I'll do the stop sharing. Are there any questions from any of you out there in the internet world, the Zoom world?
No question, Bill, but I'm going to probably contact you. Am I getting an echo? Is that better?
No, I think that's us over here coming.
What's that?
I think we're the ones that have the echo. Sorry.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send Gary the PowerPoint in a PDF format, so you can go back and look on it again. I'm going to leave my brochures with my business cards here for you, so you can have them when you come in the office. But if you're taking notes, let me give you my cell phone number and my email address. So my cell phone number is 916-832. Guess what the last 4 numbers are?
1031.
You've known that for a few years. My email address is basically Bill, my first name, the @ symbol, and then 3 letters, A as in Apple, P as in Paul, I as in Indiana, short for Asset Preservation Incorporated. So Bill at APIexchange.com. cell phone is the best place to reach me, or have clients call me or text me or whatever. So if you have a client potentially that you want to introduce this to, you can text me or call me or whatever, send smoke signals and say, hey, Bill, would you introduce the 1031 to my clients, John and Nancy Smith? And so what I will do is email them an informational package about our company, and there'll be links to the various concepts of an exchange, including our fee schedule and when to set up exchange in that package. But if you want to do a Zoom with a client and I'm available, or have me to our office to introduce them, I'm glad to do so. So this is the stack of brochures I'm leaving with my business cards for you guys. So any other questions? How about them Niners? Hopefully.
Thank you, Bill. That was great.
You're welcome. Thanks for participating.
That was really good. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank y'all for being here. You guys do not get to partake in the next part. It's only Cheryl and Kelly. They get a chance to win. See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.